Let's get to topic number one. Let's talk 2022 MMA predictions. Now, of course, we're just kind of guessing here, but this is the way that I want you to think about it. Something probably has been happening maybe this year, maybe even prior to this year, but kind of set in motion this year that we're going to see the fruits of that bear out in 2022. What would that be in mixed martial arts for you?
For me, I'm going to be really straight up and honest, and I know we're going to get into the whole Francis Ngannou beef with the UFC a little bit later in the show and the updates on that. But Luke, there's two things happening at once, and it's not only a trend to look out for 2022. To me, it's also, if you ask me, what's the prevailing storyline from MMA in 2021? It's these two ships that are about to collide. On one side, UFC had its most incredible year, both financially and really in terms of being consistently spectacular. This year was incredible. Big fights, great matchups, great results, huge upsets. Every weekend almost, it felt like something was happening. UFC could not be more mainstream, crossing over. I mean, this ESPN deal for in terms of its relevance, and it's in everyone's... I mean, it is just... Luke, maybe the fruits of Dana being so aggressive in 2020 during the pandemic was that it created this new fan base that's hungry and on fire. To be an MMA fan, you could not have been in a better calendar year, even though I've got much love for 2016. A lot of people have some love for the early Brock Lesnar rise or the Ronda Rousey rise. There's been some great years, but this year felt like as good as it can get. And I think that's about to collide with those storm clouds that are coming. As the great Sam Cooke once said, Luke, a change is going to come. You're seeing it in Ngannou, in the stance Ngannou's taken. John Jones hasn't fought in 2 years as he's taking a stand. Luke, we have speculated and argued and whatever for a long time that the control UFC has over the fighters and the matchmaking, it's the reason why this sport and this promotion is so great. The best always face the best, no matter what. I'm not saying, buckle up, it's about to get worse. But we all agree the fighters deserve better. And Luke, I don't think we're going to, trot out Bjorn Rebney again and form a union this calendar year coming up. But change is going to come, and it's going to take these big-name fighters taking a stand. So I don't want to be the guys, screaming doom and gloom is coming. But I think we're about to enter a really transformative calendar year. And I think the trend will emerge that more fighters will take a public stance, whether that's for more money or more control over their matchmaking or their contract or whatever. It's coming, Luke, and it's going to be interesting to see the fallout, both short-term and long-term for that. Because if I'm being honest, I don't want it to change because I love what the sport gives me, but I can't sit here and watch these incredible athletes who are the reason why this sport is so great not get what they deserve at the end of the day.
Are there big names that you're really keeping your eye on for who might leave the UFC in 2022? And here's what I mean. Your point is correct, right? Like, if there's going to be a change in the court case or legislation, it won't happen next year. Maybe things get set in motion next year, but it won't happen. So there's going to be something else that might happen in the short run. Do you think, not that there's a grand exodus from the UFC, because I don't think you're predicting that, but there might be some big names who leave. Who would you put at the front of the list of like high probability, big name exits next year?
Well, obviously Ngannou's situation has to be front and foremost because Dana White's openly saying, look, if you don't want to fight here, go. And, he's got a big fight coming up, a title fight against Ciryl Gane. And, we know the situation about how contracts can get draconianly extended for seemingly no reason or nothing. What, you win a championship or you turn down a fight, suddenly your contract's been extended. But look, Nate Diaz is a big character to watch as well. Even if he doesn't potentially leave for these reasons, he's also a big name free agent. You wonder if we are starting a trend where guys are working down to the end of their contract. I think Sugar Sean O'Malley is a guy to watch who at times in the past year has spoke openly about wondering what his value is on the open market. And we've questioned, is he just kind of playing out the string here to sort of test that? I just think, Luke, we're heading into an area where guys are going to find out what their value truly is. And inevitably, it's going to take some leaving for some change to happen. And, you can always say, look, there's a reason why Dana White, when asked about fighter pay, he always shits on it or says it's not a real thing. They can keep going. They can lose 4 or 5 stars, Luke, and keep going. Mm-hmm. But I'm certainly taking a look, whether it be Ngannou, John Jones, Nate Diaz, or whoever follows after that. who are going to be the ones that have very small amounts of leverage left that are going to try to use it, and what kind of change can we create? Because we always say, okay, what's the change going to be? Oh, it's going to be a big union. It's going to be a big work stoppage. It doesn't actually have to be that. It could be some sort of middle ground in between in which the promotion bends a little bit and the fighters accept it and we keep moving. But do you have a specific name, Luke, that you think could really upset the free agent market by making one of these crossovers?
I definitely feel like the Francis Ngannou situation is key to watch, because here's the thing. I actually favor Ciryl Gane to win. So that would mean that if that's true, and again, we all know Francis can go in there and put anyone's lights out at a moment's notice, but let's say for a second that he loses. That's an interesting moment in time, because one would love to have him, Bellator would love to have him, PFL would love to have him in some kind of capacity or another. The question is whether or not they can afford him. Like, one of the things that fighters keep coming back to is they'll actually fight out their contract, they'll get to the end of it, and then they'll realize, not always, but often, that, yeah, I may want to go to another promoter, but I'm not going to make nearly the same amount of money as I am if I stay in the UFC. Now, I don't know exactly what Francis' situation is and how that could work out. His situation could be very, very different, but it's going to be interesting. Can Bellator pay Francis what he wants competing in Bellator? It's going to be really, I don't know the answer to that, frankly. I'm a little skeptical, but we'll see. Nate Diaz is the other one. Those two are the ones that I've really got my eye on to see exactly what happens, because Nate Diaz kind of feeds into my point. Also, I would say that, like, this idea that, John Jones is definitely going to fight in 2022. I mean, I think it's not like he's getting arrested every day or something, but, he got arrested last year. He got arrested this year. The idea that he's just going to inevitably make it to the again, there's just a lot of questions about where exactly he's headed in all this. But
look, can you address the John Jones elephant in the room? I don't tend to subscribe to this, but I get enough DMs of people saying, BC, when are you guys going to talk about this? That he's coming up on 2 years out of the game.
Yeah.
Could that be a silent USADA suspension because of their rule change in which they don't have to publicly tell us?
Could be. Certainly could be. There's been a few of these 2-year suspensions that we were like, where is this guy? And nothing got announced. Hard to say, but I will say this, and I keep bringing this up. And dude, there's this real expectation that 2022 will be just like, 2017 for John Jones. Just pick right back up where he left off. And certainly a talent as prodigious as his, that's nothing you could sneeze at. I cannot dismiss that and say that that's wrong. But dude, there's just a lot of, the fight game in 2 years moves fast, and John was very much ahead of the ball game for many, 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 many years, maybe even still. But I think the game is definitely a lot different than it used to be, and I'm curious to see exactly how that plays out. Assuming
I agree. Before you transition out of this first point about fighter pay and the fallout of that, as much as we don't want to talk about crossover celebrity boxing, and you and I even,
I do a little bit. Well,
you and I are even a little tired of it. It does have the potential, even though it's a bubble and we all expect the bubble to pop because historically it has. You do have to wonder, Luke, in 2022, how much this could play a part in UFC fighter leverage and all of that. Because, look, there's a bold prediction to make here. If Jake Paul, for example, can keep luring MMA names and knocking them out, will it get to a point that Dana White either wants to buy in or wants to try to send a fighter over to put an end to it, or maybe that's all just ridiculous speculation, he doesn't care? Either way, that could play a role in giving, because look, if Nate Diaz becomes a free agent, it's not that we expect him to go to Bellator or PFL tomorrow. We expect him to go to boxing and cash in, right? Because as long as that is still offering a career level payday to these guys, it's going to be an allure to try to either get out of their deal or have some middle ground in which Dana White says, okay, I don't want to lose you guys, but I'll give you wiggle room to do one per year. Or if you're a big enough star to demand a Jake Paul fight, I'll co-promote you. You know what I mean? I wonder if some type of change in that area is coming, or if the bubble bursts before we even get there.
So I actually would like to approach the situation a little bit differently, but include what you just brought up, if I may. My big 2022 prediction for MMA, and this could work both ways, but I will give a separate one for boxing. BC, when we started this program, I remember sitting down with Showtime and they were asking me, how do you feel about covering boxing? And you know the story. I used to. Of course, before MMA Fighting was purchased from AOL and brought over to SB Nation. I actually did a fair amount of boxing coverage, but then got away from it all those years as an editor because I simply did not have the time. So I was actually happy to go back to it, but I bring it up to say I thought that they would just be two different things that I covered at the same time or something. And it actually turned out that's really not the case. This is actually a really good time to do what you and I are doing, which is to cover both sports. Why? My prediction for MMA, and it's for boxing too, but I'm going to look at it from the MMA side of things, is that MMA and boxing are going to bleed together in a lot of different, unique, and interesting ways. Let me give you an example. And it's already been happening, but I mean, it's going to really ramp up. The first thing I would say is from a technique perspective, we're seeing a little bit more of these Max Holloway, Adrian Yanez types. Now, those are two very elite names, but what I mean to say is guys in MMA are getting better at boxing and then bringing a boxing sort of centric kind of game to the sport, to varying degrees of success, of course, but you're seeing a lot more of it. As guys get better in boxing, they're doing better boxing in MMA. I think you're going to see a lot more of that archetype of a kind of fighter emerge. I would also argue more than that. It is clear that the MMA industry and the boxing industry are trying to find ways to work together. And in 2021, some of that might have worked where, you don't have the firmament exactly of boxing, although a little bit with Jake Paul versus, whoever he's fighting. But, even like Kubrat Pulev doing this kind of Triller triad thing where they're trying to accommodate some middle ground space where you can make it all work. When we grew up, there was massive distance between boxing and MMA. When I say grew up, I mean like junior reporters or whatever. They were not connected at all, and there was grand hostility. And a lot of that is still around. But I think what you're going to see is that trend accelerate even more in 2022. And some things are going to work. Some things are going to die off. Some things might work halfway. There's going to be a lot of experimentation, BC. There's going to be a lot of trial and error. But I do think that this thing that you've been seeing this past year, that's only going to continue into 2022.